the Pooh is the most famous of all teddy bears. He belonged to a boy called Christopher Robin, who was the son of the writer A. Milne. Milne wrote articles for the magazine Punch, some light verse for children, and a number of plays. In the 1920s, he wrote 2 books of stories about Winnie the Pooh, based on the characters of his son's toy animals, and it's for these stories that he is now chiefly remembered. Pooh has become a classic, loved by people of all ages in many countries. The books have been translated into 20 languages, including Hebrew, Japanese, and even Latin. Many millions of copies have been bought, and the books are as popular today as ever. The stories you're going to hear now all come from the first of the 2 books, Winnie the Pooh.
Once upon a time, a very long time ago now, about last Friday, Winnie the Pooh lived in a forest all by himself. One day when he was out walking, he came to an open place in the middle of the forest. And in the middle of this place was a large oak tree, and from the top of the tree there came a loud buzzing noise. Winnie the Pooh sat down at the foot of the tree, put his head between his paws, and began to think. First of all, he said to himself, "That buzzing noise means something. You don't get a buzzing noise like that, just buzzing and buzzing without its meaning something. If there's a buzzing noise, somebody's making a buzzing noise. And the only reason for making a buzzing noise that I know of is because you're a bee." Then he thought another long time and said, "And the only reason for being a bee that I know of is making honey." And then he got up and said, "And the only reason for making honey is so as I can eat it." So he began to climb the tree. He climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed. And as he climbed, he sang a little song to himself. It went like this. "Isn't it funny how a bear likes honey? Buzz, buzz, buzz. I wonder why he does." And then he climbed a little further, and a little further, and then just a little further. By that time, he'd thought of another song. "It's a very funny thought that if bears were bees, they'd build their nests at the bottom of trees. And that being so, if the bees were bears, we shouldn't have to climb up all these stairs." He was getting rather tired by this time, so that is why he sang a complaining song. He was nearly there now, and if he just stood on that branch... Crack! "Oh, help!" said Pooh, as he dropped 10 feet onto the branch below him. "If only I hadn't," he said, as he bounced 20 feet onto the next branch. "You see, what I meant to do," he explained, as he turned head over heels and crashed onto another branch 30 feet below. "What I meant to do... Of course, it was rather," he admitted, as he slithered very quickly through the next 6 branches. "It all comes, I suppose," he decided, as he said goodbye to the last branch, spun round 3 times and flew gracefully into a gorse bush. "It all comes of liking honey so much. Oh, help!" He crawled out of the gorse bush, brushed the prickles from his nose, and began to think again. And the first person he thought of was Christopher Robin. So Winnie the Pooh went round to his friend Christopher Robin, who lived behind a green door in another part of the forest. "Good morning, Christopher Robin," he said. "Good morning, Winnie the Pooh. I wonder if you've got such a thing as a balloon about you." "A balloon?" "Yes, I just said to myself, coming along, I wonder if Christopher Robin has such a thing as a balloon about him. I just said it to myself, thinking of balloons and wondering. What do you want a balloon for? Christopher Robin said. Winnie the Pooh looked around to see that nobody was listening, put his paw to his mouth, and said in a deep whisper, Honey. But you don't get honey with balloons. I do, said Pooh. Well, it just happened that Christopher Robin had been to a party the day before at the house of his friend Piglet, and they'd had balloons at the party. Christopher Robin had had a big green balloon, and one of Rabbit's relations had had a big blue one, and had left it behind, being really too young to go to a party at all. And so Christopher Robin had brought the green one and the blue one home with him. Which one would you like? He asked Pooh. Pooh put his head between his paws and thought very carefully. It's like this, he said. When you go after honey with a balloon, the great thing is not to let the bees know you're coming. Now, if you have a green balloon, they might think you were only part of the tree and not notice you. And if you have a blue balloon, they might think you were only part of the sky and not notice you. And the question is, which is most likely? Wouldn't they notice you underneath the balloon? Christopher Robin asked. They might, or they might not, said Winnie the Pooh. You never can tell with bees. He thought for a moment and said, I shall try to look like a small black cloud. That'll deceive them. Then you'd better have the blue balloon, Christopher Robin said. And so it was decided. Well, they both went out with the blue balloon, and Christopher Robin took his gun with him, just in case, as he always did. And Winnie the Pooh went to a very muddy place that he knew of, and rolled until he was black all over. And then, when the balloon was blown up as big, and they were both holding onto the string, Christopher Robin let go suddenly, and Pooh Bear floated gracefully up into the sky and stayed there, level with the top of the tree and about 20 feet away from it. Hooray! Christopher Robin shouted. Isn't that fine? Shouted Winnie the Pooh. What do I look like? You look like a bear holding on to a balloon. Not, said Pooh anxiously, not like a small black cloud in a blue sky? Not very much. Ah, well, perhaps from up here it looks different. And as I say, you never can tell with bees. There was no wind to blow him nearer to the tree, so there he stayed. He could see the honey, he could smell the honey, but he couldn't quite reach the honey. After a little while, he called down. Christopher Robin, he said in a loud whisper. Hello. I think the bees suspect something. What sort of thing? I don't know, but something tells me that they're suspicious. Perhaps they think that you're after their honey. It may be that. You never can tell with bees. There was another little silence, and then he called down again. Christopher Robin? Yes? Have you an umbrella in your house? I think so. I wish you would bring it out here and walk up and down with it, and look up at me every now and then and say, Tut, tut, it looks like rain. I think if you did that, it would help the deception which we are practicing on these bees. Well, Christopher Robin laughed to himself. Silly old bear. But he didn't say it aloud, because he was so fond of him. and he went home for his umbrella. "Oh, there you are," called down Winnie the Pooh as soon as Christopher Robin got back to the tree. "I was beginning to get anxious. I have discovered that the bees are now definitely suspicious." "Shall I put my umbrella up?" Christopher Robin said. "Yes, but wait a moment. We must be practical. The important bee to deceive is the queen bee. Now, can you see which is the queen bee from down there?" "No." Pity. "Well, now, if you walk up and down with your umbrella saying, 'Tut, tut, it looks like rain,' I shall do what I can by singing a little cloud song, such as a cloud might sing. Go." So, while Christopher Robin walked up and down and wondered if it would rain, Winnie the Pooh sang this song. "How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. Every little cloud always sings aloud. How sweet to be a cloud floating in the blue. It makes him very proud to be a little cloud." The bees were still buzzing as suspiciously as ever. Some of them indeed left their nests and flew all round the cloud as it began the second verse of this song, and one bee sat down on the nose of the cloud for a moment, and then got up again. "Christopher! Ow! Robin!" called out the cloud. "Yes? I've just been thinking, and I've come to a very important decision. These are the wrong sort of bees." "Are they?" "Quite the wrong sort, so I should think they would make the wrong sort of honey, shouldn't you?" "Would they?" "Yes, so I think I shall come down." "How?" asked Christopher Robin. Winnie the Pooh hadn't thought about this. If he let go of the string, he would fall, bump, and he didn't like the idea of that. So he thought for a long time, and then he said, "Christopher Robin, you must shoot the balloon with your gun. Have you got your gun?" "Well, of course I have," Christopher Robin said. "But if I do that, it'll spoil the balloon." "But if you don't," said Pooh, "I shall have to let go, and that would spoil me." When he put it like this, Christopher Robin saw how it was, and he aimed very carefully at the balloon and fired. "Ow!" said Pooh. "Did I miss?" "You didn't exactly miss," said Pooh, "but you missed the balloon." "I'm so sorry," Christopher Robin said, and fired again. And this time he hit the balloon, and the air came slowly out, and Winnie the Pooh floated down to the ground. But his arms were so stiff from holding onto the string of the balloon all that time that they stayed up straight in the air for more than a week. And whenever a fly came and settled on his nose, he had to blow it off. And I think, but I'm not sure, that is why he was always called Pooh. Pooh goes visiting and gets into a tight place. Edward Bear, known to his friends as Winnie the Pooh, or Pooh for short, was walking through the forest one day, humming proudly to himself. He had made up a little hum that very morning as he was doing his stoutness exercises in front of the glass. Tra-la-la, tra-la-la, as he stretched up as high as he could go, and then tra-la-la, tra-la, ooh, help, la, as he tried to reach his toes. After breakfast, he had said it over and over to himself until he'd learnt it off by heart, and now he was humming it right through, properly. It went like this. Tra-la-la, 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 rum-tum, tiddle-rum-tum, tiddle-diddle, 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 rum-tum, humming this hum to himself, and walking gaily along, wondering what everybody else was doing, and what it felt like being somebody else, when suddenly he came to a sandy bank, and in the bank was a large hole. "Aha!" said Pooh. "Rum-tum-tiddle-tum-tum. If I know anything about anything, that hole means rabbit," he said. "And rabbit means company," he said. "And company means food, and listening to me humming and such like. Rum-tum-tum-tiddle-tum." So he bent down, put his head into the hole, and called out, "Is anybody at home?" There was a sudden scuffling noise from inside the hole, and then silence. "What I said was, is anybody at home?" called out Pooh, very loudly. "No," said a voice, and then added, "You needn't shout so loud. I heard you quite well the first time." "Bother," said Pooh. "Isn't there anybody here at all?" "Nobody." Winnie the Pooh took his head out of the hole and thought for a little. And he thought to himself, there must be somebody there, because somebody must have said nobody. So he put his head back in the hole and said, "Hello, Rabbit. Isn't that you?" "No," said Rabbit, in a different sort of voice this time. "But isn't that Rabbit's voice?" "I don't think so," said Rabbit. "It isn't meant to be." "Oh," said Pooh. He took his head out of the hole and had another think, and then he put it back and said, "Well, could you very kindly tell me where Rabbit is?" "He's gone to see his friend Pooh Bear, who is a great friend of his." "But this is me," said Bear, very much surprised. "What sort of me?" "Pooh Bear." "Are you sure?" said Rabbit, still more surprised. Quite sure," said Pooh. "Oh, well, then, come in." So Pooh pushed and pushed his way through the hole, and at last he got in. "You are quite right," said Rabbit, looking at him all over. "It is you. Glad to see you." "Who did you think it was?" "Well, I wasn't sure. You know how it is in the forest. One can't have anybody coming into one's house. One has to be careful. What about a mouthful of something?" Pooh always liked a little something at 11 o'clock in the morning, and he was very glad to see Rabbit getting out the plates and mugs. And when Rabbit said, "Honey or condensed milk with your bread?" he was so excited that he said, "Both." And then, so as not to seem greedy, he added, "But don't bother about the bread, please." And for a long time after that, he said nothing, until at last, humming to himself in a rather sticky voice, he got up, shook Rabbit lovingly by the paw, and said that he must be going on. "Must you?" said Rabbit, politely. "Well," said Pooh, "I could stay a little longer if you... And he tried very hard not to look in the direction of the larder. "As a matter of fact," said Rabbit, "I was going out myself directly." "Oh, well then, I'll be going on. Goodbye." "Well, goodbye, if you're sure you won't have any more." "Is there any more?" asked Pooh quickly. Rabbit took the covers off the dishes and said, "No, there wasn't." I thought not," said Pooh, nodding to himself. "Well, goodbye. I must be going on." So he started to climb out of the hole. He pulled with his front paws and pushed with his back paws, and in a little while his nose was out in the open again, and then his ears, then his front paws, and then his shoulders, and then... Oh, help," said Pooh. "I'd better go back." Oh, bother," said Pooh. "I shall have to go on." Now, by this time, Rabbit wanted to go for a walk too, and finding the front door full, he went out by the back door, and came round to Pooh and looked at him. "Hello, you stuck?" he asked. "No," said Pooh carelessly. "Just resting and thinking and humming to myself." "Here, give us a paw." Pooh Bear stretched out a paw, And Rabbit pulled and pulled and pulled. "Ow!" cried Pooh. "You're hurting." "The fact is," said Rabbit, "you're stuck. It all comes," said Pooh crossly, "of not having front doors big enough." "It all comes," said Rabbit sternly, "of eating too much." "I thought at the time," said Rabbit, "only I didn't like to say anything," said Rabbit, "that one of us was eating too much," said Rabbit. "And I knew it wasn't me," he said. "Well, well, I shall go and fetch Christopher Robin." Christopher Robin lived at the other end of the forest, and when he came back with Rabbit and saw the front half of Pooh, he said, "Silly old bear," in such a loving voice that everyone felt quite hopeful again. I was just beginning to think," said Bear, sniffing slightly, "that Rabbit might never be able to use his front door again. And I should hate that," he said. "So should I," said Rabbit. "Use his front door again?" said Christopher Robin. "Of course he'll use his front door again." "Good," said Rabbit. "If we can't pull you out, Pooh, we might push you back." Rabbit scratched his whiskers thoughtfully and pointed out that when once Pooh was pushed back, he was back, and of course nobody was more glad to see Pooh than he was. Still, there it was. Some lived in trees and some lived underground, and... "You mean I'd never get out?" said Pooh. "I mean," said Rabbit, "that having got so far, it seems a pity to waste it." Christopher Robin nodded. "Then there's only one thing to be done," he said. "We shall have to wait for you to get thin again." "How long does getting thin take?" asked Pooh anxiously. "About a week, I should think." "But I can't stay here for a week." "You can stay here all right, silly old bear. It's getting you out which is so difficult." "We'll read to you," said Rabbit cheerfully. "And I hope it won't snow," he added. "And I say, old fellow, you're taking up a good deal of room in my house. Do you mind if I use your back legs as a towel horse? Because, I mean, there they are, doing nothing, and it would be very convenient just to hang the towels on them." "A week," said Pooh gloomily. "What about meals?" "Oh, I'm afraid no meals," said Christopher Robin, "because of getting thin quicker. But we will read to you." Bear began to sigh, and then found he couldn't because he was so tightly stuck, and a tear rolled down his eye as he said, "Then would you read a sustaining book, such as would help and comfort a wedged bear in great tightness?" So for a week Christopher Robin read that sort of book at the north end of Pooh, and Rabbit hung his washing on the south end, and in between Bear felt himself getting slenderer and slenderer. And at the end of the week, Christopher Robin said, "Now." So he took hold of Pooh's front paws, and Rabbit took hold of Christopher Robin, and all Rabbit's friends and relations took hold of Rabbit, and they all pulled together. And for a long time, Pooh only said, "Ow!" and "Oh!" And then all of a sudden, he said, "Pop!" just as if a cork were coming out of a bottle. And Christopher Robin and Rabbit and all Rabbit's friends and relations went head over heels backwards, and on the top of them came Winnie the Pooh, free. So, with a nod of thanks to his friends, he went on with his walk through the forest, humming proudly to himself. But Christopher Robin looked after him lovingly and said to himself, "Silly old bear." Piglet meets a Heffalump. One day, when Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh and Piglet were all talking together, Christopher Robin finished the mouthful he was eating and said carelessly, "I saw a Heffalump today, Piglet." "What was it doing?" asked Piglet. "Just lumping along," said Christopher Robin. "I don't think it saw me."
"I saw one once," said Piglet. "At least I think I did," he said. "Only perhaps it wasn't."
"So did I," said Pooh, wondering what a heffalump was like. "You don't often see them," said Christopher Robin, carelessly.
"Not now,"
said Piglet. "Not at this time of the year," said Pooh. Then they all talked about something else until it was time for Pooh and Piglet to go home together. And then, just as they came to the 6 pine trees, Pooh looked round to see that nobody else was listening, and said, in a very solemn voice, "Piglet, I have decided something."
"What have you decided, Pooh?"
"I have decided to catch a heffalump." Pooh nodded his head several times as he said this, and waited for Piglet to say, "How?" or "Pooh, you couldn't," or something helpful of that sort. But Piglet said nothing. The fact was, Piglet was wishing that he had thought about it first. "I shall do it," said Pooh, after waiting a little longer, "by means of a trap. And it must be a cunning trap, so you will have to help me, Piglet."
"Pooh,"
said Piglet, feeling quite happy again now,
"I will."
and then he said,
"How shall we do it?"
and Pooh said, "That's just it. How?" And then they sat down together to think it out. Pooh's first idea was that they should dig a very deep pit, and that the heffalump would come along and fall into the pit, and
"Why?"
said Piglet. "Why what?" said Pooh.
"Why would he fall in?"
Pooh rubbed his nose with his paw and said that the heffalump might be walking along, humming a little song, looking up at the sky, wondering if it would rain, and so he wouldn't see the very deep pit until he was halfway down, when it would be too late. Piglet said that this was a very good trap, but supposing it were raining already? Pooh rubbed his nose again and said that he hadn't thought of that. And then he brightened up and said that if it were raining already, the heffalump would be looking at the sky wondering if it would clear up, and so he wouldn't see the very deep pit until he was halfway down, when it would be too late. Piglet said that now that this point had been explained, he thought it was a cunning trap. Pooh was very proud when he heard this, and he felt that the heffalump was as good as caught already, but there was just one other thing which had to be thought about, and it was this: where should they dig the very deep pit? Piglet said that the best place would be somewhere where a heffalump was, just before he fell into it, only about a foot further on. "But then he would see us digging it," said Pooh.
"Not if he was looking up at the sky."
"He would suspect," said Pooh, "if he happened to look down." He thought for a long time, and then added sadly, "It isn't as easy as I thought. I suppose that's why heffalumps hardly ever get caught."
"That must be it,"
said Piglet. They sighed and got up, and when they had taken a few gorse prickles out of themselves, they sat down again. And all the time Pooh was saying to himself, "If only I could think of something," for he felt sure that a very clever brain could catch a heffalump, if only he knew the right way to go about it. "Suppose," he said to Piglet, "you wanted to catch me. How would you do it?"
"Well," said Piglet, "I should do it like this. I should make a trap, and I should put a jar of honey in the trap, and you would smell it, and you would go in after it,
And I would go in after it," said Pooh excitedly, "only very carefully, so as not to hurt myself, and I would get to the jar of honey, and I should lick all round the edges first of all, pretending that there wasn't any more, you know, and then I should walk away and think about it a little, and then I should come back and start licking in the middle of the jar, and then—"
"Yes, well, never mind about that. There you would be, and there I should catch you. Now, the first thing to think of is, what do heffalumps like? I should think acorns, shouldn't you? We'll get a lot of... I say, wake up, Pooh."
Pooh who had gone into a happy dream, woke up with a start and said that honey was a much more trappy thing than acorns. Piglet didn't think so, and they were just going to argue about it, when Piglet remembered that if they put the acorns in the trap, he would have to find the acorns, and if they put honey, then Pooh would have to give up some of his own honey. So he said,
"All right, honey then."
just as Pooh remembered it too, and was going to say, "All right, acorns."
"Honey,"
said Piglet to himself in a thoughtful way, as if it were now settled.
"I'll dig the pit while you go and get the honey."
"Very well," said Pooh, and he stumped off. As soon as he got home, he went to the larder, and he stood on a chair and took down a very large jar of honey from the top shelf. It had honey written on it. Hunny. But just to make sure, he took off the paper cover and looked at it, and it looked just like honey. "But you never can tell," said Pooh. "I remember my uncle saying once that he had seen cheese just this colour." So he put his tongue in and took a large lick. "Yes," he said, "it is. No doubt about that. And honey, I should say, right down to the bottom of the jar. Unless, of course," he said, "somebody put cheese in at the bottom, just for a joke. Perhaps I'd better go in a little further, just in case Heffalumps don't like cheese, same as me. Ah." And he gave a deep sigh. "I was right. It is honey, right the way down." Having made certain of this, he took the jar back to Piglet, and Piglet looked up from the bottom of his very deep pit and said,
"Got it?"
and Pooh said, "Yes, but it isn't quite a full jar." And he threw it down to Piglet, and Piglet said,
"No, it isn't. Is that all you've got left?"
and Pooh said, "Yes," because it was. So Piglet put the jar at the bottom of the pit and climbed out, and they went off home together.
"Well, good night, Pooh,"
said Piglet when they got to Pooh's house.
"and we meet at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning by the pine trees and see how many heffalumps we've got in our trap."
6 o'clock, Piglet. And have you got any string?"
"No. Why do you want string?"
"To lead them home with."
"Oh, I think heffalumps come if you whistle."
"Some do, and some don't. You never can tell with heffalumps. Well, good night." And off Piglet trotted to his house, while Pooh made his preparations for bed. Some hours later, just as the night was beginning to steal away, Pooh woke up suddenly with a sinking feeling. He had had that sinking feeling before, and he knew what it meant. He was hungry. So he went to the larder, and he stood on a chair and reached up to the top shelf and found nothing. "Bother," said Pooh. "It all comes of trying to be kind to heffalumps." And he got back into bed. But he couldn't sleep. The more he tried to sleep, the more he couldn't. He tried counting sheep, which is sometimes a good way of getting to sleep, and as that was no good, he tried counting heffalumps, and that was worse, because every heffalump that he counted was making straight for a pot of Pooh's honey and eating it all. Pooh could bear it no longer. He jumped out of bed, he ran out of the house, and he ran straight to the 6 pine trees. The sun was still in bed, but there was a lightness in the sky over the 100-acre wood which seemed to show that it was waking up and would soon be kicking off the clothes. In the half-light the pine trees looked cold and lonely, and the very deep pit seemed deeper than it was, and Pooh's jar of honey at the bottom was something mysterious, a shape and no more. But as he got nearer to it, his nose told him that it was indeed honey, and his tongue came out and began to polish up his mouth, ready for it. "Bother," said Pooh, as he got his nose inside the jar. "A heffalump has been eating it." And then he thought a little and said, Oh no, I did. I forgot." Indeed, he had eaten most of it. But there was a little left at the very bottom of the jar, and he pushed his head right in and began to lick. By and by, Piglet woke up. As soon as he woke, he said to himself,
Oh,
and then he said bravely,
yes,
and then, still more bravely,
quite so.
but he didn't feel very brave, for the word which was really jiggetting about in his brain was heffalumps. What was a heffalump like? Was it fierce? Did it come when you whistled? And how did it come? Was it fond of pigs at all? If it was fond of pigs, did it make any difference what sort of pig? He didn't know the answer to any of these questions, and he was going to see his first heffalump in about an hour from now. Of course, Pooh would be with him, and it was much more friendly with two, but suppose heffalumps were very fierce with pigs and bears? Wouldn't it be better to pretend that he had a headache and couldn't go up to the 6 pine trees this morning? But then, suppose that it was a very fine day and there was no heffalump in the trap. Here he would be, in bed all the morning, simply wasting his time for nothing. What should he do? And then he had a clever idea. He would go up very quietly to the 6 pine trees now, peep very cautiously into the trap and see if there was a heffalump there, and if there was, he would go back to bed, and if there wasn't, he wouldn't. So off he went. At first he thought that there wouldn't be a heffalump in the trap, and then he thought that there would. And as he got nearer, he was sure that there would, because he could hear it, heffalumping about like anything.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear,
said Piglet to himself, and he wanted to run away, but somehow, having got so near, he felt that he must just see what a heffalump was like. So he crept to the side of the trap and looked in. And all the time, Winnie the Pooh had been trying to get the honey jar off his head. The more he shook it, the more tightly it stuck. "Bother," he said, inside the jar, and "Oh, help," and mostly "Oh." And he tried bumping it against things, but as he couldn't see what he was bumping it against, it didn't help him. And he tried to climb out of the trap, but as he could see nothing but jar, and not much of that, he couldn't find his way. So at last he lifted up his head, jar and all, and made a loud roaring noise of sadness and despair. "Oh!" And it was at that moment that Piglet looked down.
help, help,
Cried Piglet,
a heffalump, a horrible heffalump.
and he scampered off as hard as he could, still crying out,
Help, help, a horrible heffalump, half, half, a hell of a horror-lump, haul, haul, a hoffable hellerump.
and he didn't stop crying and scampering until he got to Christopher Robin's house. "Whatever's the matter, Piglet?" said Christopher Robin, who was just getting up.
Heff, 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 heff,
Said Piglet, breathing so hard that he could hardly speak.
a heffalump.
"Where?"
Up there,
said Piglet, waving his paw. "What did it look like?"
like it had the biggest head you ever saw, Christopher Robin. A great enormous thing, like nothing. A huge big, well, like I don't know, like an enormous big nothing. It's like a jar.
"Well," said Christopher Robin, putting on his shoes, "I shall go and look at it. Come on. Piglet wasn't afraid if he had Christopher Robin with him, so off they went.
I can hear it, can't you?
Said Piglet anxiously as they got near. I can hear something, said Christopher Robin. It was Pooh, bumping his head against a tree root he'd found.
There,
Said Piglet,
isn't it awful?
and he held on tight to Christopher Robin's hand. And suddenly, Christopher Robin began to laugh. And he laughed, and he laughed, and he laughed. And while he was still laughing, crash went the Heffalumps' head against the tree root. Smash went the jar, and out came Pooh's head again. Then Piglet saw what a foolish Piglet he'd been, and he was so ashamed of himself that he ran straight off home and went to bed with a headache. But Christopher Robin and Pooh went home for breakfast together.
In the next story from Winnie the Pooh, we meet Eeyore, who has a birthday and gets 2 presents.
Eeyore, the old grey donkey, stood by the side of the stream and looked at himself in the water.
Pathetic,
He said,
that's what it is. Pathetic.
He turned and walked slowly down the stream for 20 yards, splashed across it, and walked slowly back on the other side. Then he looked at himself in the water again.
As I thought,
He said,
no better from this side. But nobody minds. Nobody cares. Pathetic, that's what it is.
There was a crackling noise in the bracken behind him, and out came Pooh. "Good morning, Eeyore," said Pooh.
Good morning, Pooh Bear,
Said Eeyore gloomily.
if it is a good morning,
He said.
which I doubt.
Said he. "Why, what's the matter?"
Nothing, Pooh Bear, nothing. We can't all, and some of us don't. That's all there is to it.
"Can't all what?" said Pooh, rubbing his nose.
Gaiety, song and dance, here we go round the mulberry bush.
"Oh," said Pooh. He thought for a long time and then asked, "What mulberry bush is that?"
Bonhomie,
went on Eeyore gloomily.
French word meaning bonhomie,
He explained.
I'm not complaining, but there it is.
Pooh sat down on a large stone and tried to think this out. It sounded to him like a riddle, and he was never much good at riddles, being a bear of very little brain. So he sang Cottleston Pie instead. Cottleston, Cottleston, Cottleston Pie. A fly can't bird, but a bird can fly. Ask me a riddle and I reply. Cottleston, Cottleston, Cottleston Pie. That was the first verse. When he'd finished it, Eeyore didn't actually say he didn't like it, so Pooh very kindly sang the second verse to him. Cottleston, Cottleston, Cottleston pie. A fish can't whistle, and neither can I. Ask me a riddle, and I reply. Cottleston, Cottleston, Cottleston pie.
That's right,
said Eeyore.
Sing. Umpty-tiddly, umpty-doo. Here we go gathering nuts and may. Enjoy yourself.
I am, said Pooh.
Some can.
Said Eeyore. Why, what's the matter?
Is anything the matter?
You seem so sad, Eeyore.
Sad? Why should I be sad? It's my birthday, the happiest day of the year.
Your birthday? Said Pooh in great surprise.
Of course it is. Can't you see? Look at all the presents I've had.
He waved a foot from side to side.
Look at the birthday cake, candles and pink sugar.
Pooh looked, first to the right and then to the left. Presents, said Pooh. Birthday cake, said Pooh. Where?
Can't you see them?
No, said Pooh.
Neither can I,
said Eeyore.
Joke,
he explained.
ha ha.
Pooh scratched his head, being a little puzzled by all this. But is it really your birthday? He asked.
It is.
Oh, well, many happy returns of the day, Eeyore.
And many happy returns to you, Pooh Bear.
But it isn't my birthday.
No, it's mine.
But you said many happy returns.
Well, why not? You don't always want to be miserable on my birthday, do you?
Oh, I see, said Pooh.
It's bad enough,
said Eeyore, almost breaking down.
It's bad enough being miserable myself, what with no presents and no cake and no candles and no proper notice taken of me at all. But if everybody else is going to be miserable too...
This was too much for Pooh. Stay there, he called to Eeyore, as he turned and hurried back home as quick as he could, for he felt that he must get poor Eeyore a present of some sort at once, and he could always think of a proper one afterwards. Outside his house, he found Piglet, jumping up and down, trying to reach the knocker. "Hello, Piglet," he said.
Hello, Pooh.
Said Piglet. "What are you trying to do?"
I was trying to reach the knocker.
Said Piglet.
I just came round.
"Let me do it for you," said Pooh kindly. So he reached up and knocked at the door. "I've just seen Eeyore," he began, "and poor Eeyore is in a very sad condition because it's his birthday and nobody has taken any notice of it, and he's very gloomy. You know what Eeyore is. And there he was, and what a long time whoever lives here is answering this door." And he knocked again.
But, Pooh,
Said Piglet.
it's your own house.
"Oh," said Pooh. "So it is," he said. "Well, let's go in." So in they went. The first thing Pooh did was to go to the cupboard to see if he had quite a small jar of honey left, and he had, so he took it down. "I'm giving this to Eeyore," he explained, "as a present. What are you going to give?"
Couldn't I give it too?
Said Piglet.
From both of us?
"No," said Pooh. "That would not be a good plan."
All right, then. I'll give him a balloon. I've got one left from my party. I'll go and get it now, shall I?
That, Piglet, is a very good idea. It's just what Eeyore wants to cheer him up. Nobody can be uncheered with a balloon. So off Piglet trotted, and in the other direction went Pooh, with his jar of honey. It was a warm day, and he had a long way to go. He hadn't gone more than halfway when a sort of funny feeling began to creep all over him. So he sat down and took the top off his jar of honey. Lucky I brought this with me, he thought. Many a bear going out on a warm day like this would never have thought of bringing a little something with him. And he began to eat. Now let me see, he thought, as he took his last lick of the inside of the jar. Where was I going? Ah, yes, Eeyore. He got up slowly, and then, suddenly, he remembered. He had eaten Eeyore's birthday present. Bother, said Pooh. What shall I do? I must give him something. For a little while he couldn't think of anything. Then he thought, well, it's a very nice pot, even if there's no honey in it. And if I washed it clean and got somebody to write a happy birthday on it, Eeyore could keep things in it which might be useful. So as he was just passing the 100-acre wood, he went inside to call on Owl, who lived there. Good morning, Owl, he said. Good morning, Pooh, said Owl. Many happy returns of Eeyore's birthday, said Pooh. Oh, is that what it is? What are you giving him, Owl? What are you giving him, Pooh? I'm giving him a useful pot to keep things in, and I wanted to ask you... Oh, is this it? Said Owl, taking it out of Pooh's paw. Yes, and I wanted to ask you... somebody has been keeping honey in it, said Owl. You can keep anything in it, said Pooh earnestly. It's very useful like that, and I wanted to ask you... You ought to write a happy birthday on it. That was what I wanted to ask you, said Pooh, because my spelling is wobbly. It's good spelling, but it wobbles, and the letters get in the wrong places. Would you write a happy birthday on it for me? It's a nice pot, said Owl, looking at it all round. Couldn't I give it two, from both of us? No, said Pooh. That would not be a good plan. Now, I'll just wash it first, and then you can write on it. Well, he washed the pot out and dried it, while Owl licked the end of his pencil and wondered how to spell birthday. Can you read, Pooh? He asked, a little anxiously. There's a notice about knocking and ringing outside my door, which Christopher Robin wrote. Could you read it? Christopher Robin told me what it said, and then I could. Well, I'll tell you what this says, and then you'll be able to. So Owl wrote. Hippy, pappy, Pooh looked on admiringly. I'm just saying a happy birthday, said Owl carelessly. It's a nice long one, said Pooh, very much impressed by it. Well, actually, of course, I'm saying a very happy birthday with love from Pooh. Naturally, it takes a good deal of pencil to say a long thing like that. Oh, I see, said Pooh. While all this was happening, Piglet had gone back to his own house to get Eeyore's balloon. He held it very tightly against himself so that it shouldn't blow away, and he ran as fast as he could so as to get to Eeyore before Pooh did. For he thought that he would like to be the first one to give a present, just as if he'd thought of it, without being told by anybody. And running along and thinking how pleased Eeyore would be, he didn't look where he was going. And suddenly he put his foot in a rabbit hole and fell down flat on his face. Bang! Piglet lay there, wondering what had happened. At first he thought that the whole world had blown up, and then he thought that perhaps only the forest part of it had, and then he thought that perhaps only he had, and he was now alone in the moon or somewhere, and would never see Christopher Robin or Pooh or Eeyore again. And then he thought,
Well, even if I'm in the moon, I needn't be face downwards all the time.
so he got cautiously up and looked about him. He was still in the forest.
Well, that's funny,
He thought.
I wonder what that bang was. I couldn't have made such a noise just falling down. And where's my balloon? And what's that small piece of damp rag doing?
It was the balloon,
Oh, dear!
said Piglet.
Oh, dear! Oh, dearie, dearie, dear! Well, it's too late now. I can't go back, and I haven't another balloon. And perhaps Eeyore doesn't like balloons so very much.
So he trotted on, rather sadly now, and down he came to the side of the stream where Eeyore was, and called out to him.
Good morning, Eeyore!
Shouted Piglet.
Good morning, little Piglet.
Said Eeyore.
If it is a good morning,
He said.
which I doubt,
Said he.
not that it matters.
He said.
Many happy returns of the day.
Said Piglet, having now got closer. Eeyore stopped looking at himself in the stream and turned to stare at Piglet.
Just say that again.
He said.
Many happy...
Wait a moment.
Balancing on 3 legs, he began to bring his 4th leg very cautiously up to his ear.
I did this yesterday.
He explained as he fell down for the 3rd time.
It's quite easy. It's so as I can hear you better. There. That's done it. Now then, what were you saying?
He pushed his ear forward with his hoof.
Many happy returns of the day.
Said Piglet again.
Meaning me?
Of course, Eeyore.
My birthday?
Yes.
Me having a real birthday?
Yes, Eeyore, and I brought you a present.
Me going on having a real birthday?
Yes, Eeyore, and I brought you a balloon.
Balloon?
Said Eeyore.
You did say balloon. One of those big coloured things you blow up. Gaiety, song and dance. Here we are and there we are.
Yes, but I'm afraid I'm very sorry, Eeyore, but when I was running along to bring it to you, I fell down.
Dear, dear, how unlucky. You ran too fast, I expect. You didn't hurt yourself, little Piglet.
No, but... no. Oh, Eeyore, I burst the balloon.
There was a very long silence.
My balloon?
Said Eeyore at last. Piglet nodded.
My birthday balloon?
Yes, Eeyore,
Said Piglet, sniffing a little.
here it is, with many happy returns of the day.
And he gave Eeyore the small piece of damp rag.
Is this it?
Said Eeyore, a little surprised. Piglet nodded.
My present?
Piglet nodded again.
The balloon?
Yes.
Thank you, Piglet.
Said Eeyore.
You don't mind my asking,
He went on.
but what colour was this balloon when it... when it was a balloon?
Red.
I just wondered. Red, he murmured to himself. My favourite colour. How big was it?
About as big as me.
I just wondered. About as big as Piglet, he said to himself, sadly. My favourite size. Well, well. Piglet felt very miserable and didn't know what to say. He was still opening his mouth to begin something and then deciding it wasn't any good saying that, when he heard a shout from the other side of the river. And there was Pooh. "Many happy returns of the day," called out Pooh, forgetting that he'd said it already. "Thank you, Pooh. I'm having them," said Eeyore gloomily. "I've brought you a little present," said Pooh excitedly. "I've had it," said Eeyore. Pooh had now splashed across the stream to Eeyore, and Piglet was sitting a little way off, his head in his paws, snuffling to himself. "It's a useful pot," said Pooh. "Here it is. And it's got 'A very happy birthday with love from Pooh' written on it. That's what all that writing is, and it's for putting things in. There." When Eeyore saw the pot, he became quite excited. "Why," he said, "I believe my balloon will just go into that pot." "Oh, no, Eeyore," said Pooh. "Balloons are much too big to go into pots. What you do with a balloon is, you hold the balloon—" "Not mine," said Eeyore proudly. "Look, Piglet." And as Piglet looked sorrowfully round, Eeyore picked the balloon up with his teeth and placed it carefully in the pot, picked it out and put it on the ground, and then picked it up again and put it carefully back. "So it does," said Pooh. "It goes in."
"So it does," said Piglet. "And it comes out."
"Doesn't it?" said Eeyore. "It goes in and out like anything."
"I'm very glad," said Pooh happily, "that I thought of giving you a useful pot to put things in."
"And I'm very glad," said Piglet happily, "that I thought of giving you something to put in a useful pot."
But Eeyore wasn't listening. He was taking the balloon out and putting it back again, as happy as could be. Piglet is entirely surrounded by water. It rained, and it rained, and it rained. Piglet told himself that never, in all his life, and he was goodness knows how old, 3 was it, or 4, never had he seen so much rain. Days and days and days.
"If only,"
he thought as he looked out of the window,
"if only I'd been in Pooh's house, or Christopher Robin's house, or Rabbit's house when it began to rain, then I should have had company all this time, instead of being here all alone with nothing to do except wonder when it will stop. It's a little anxious," he said to himself, "to be a very small animal, entirely surrounded by water. Christopher Robin and Pooh could escape by climbing trees, and Kanga could escape by jumping, and Rabbit could escape by burrowing, and Owl could escape by flying, and Eeyore could escape by making a loud noise until rescued. And here I am, surrounded by water, and I can't do anything."
It went on raining, and every day the water got a little higher, until now it was nearly up to Piglet's window, and still he hadn't done anything. Then suddenly he remembered a story which Christopher Robin had told him about a man on a desert island who had written something in a bottle and thrown it into the sea. And Piglet thought that if he wrote something in a bottle and threw it in the water, perhaps somebody would come and rescue him. He left the window and began to search his house, all of it that wasn't under water, and at last he found a pencil and a small piece of dry paper and a bottle with a cork to it. And he wrote on one side of the paper, "Help! Piglet! Me!" And on the other side, "It's me, Piglet! Help! Help!" Then he put the paper in the bottle, and he corked the bottle up as tightly as he could. And he leant out of his window as far as he could lean without falling in, and he threw the bottle as far as he could throw. Splash! And in a little while it bobbed up again on the water, and he watched it floating slowly away in the distance, until his eyes ached with looking. And sometimes he thought it was the bottle, and sometimes he thought it was just a ripple on the water which he was following. And then suddenly he knew that he would never see it again, and that he had done all he could do to save himself.
So now, he thought, somebody else will have to do something. And I hope they'll do it soon, because if they don't, I shall have to swim, which I can't, so I hope they do it soon.
And then he gave a very long sigh and said,
I wish Pooh were here. It's so much more friendly with two.
When the rain began, Pooh was asleep. It rained, and it rained, and it rained, and he slept, and he slept, and he slept. He'd had a tiring day. Then, suddenly, he was dreaming. He was at the East Pole, and it was a very cold pole, with the coldest sort of snow and ice all over it. He had found a beehive to sleep in, but there wasn't room for his legs, so he'd left them outside. And wild woozles, such as inhabit the East Pole, came and nibbled all the fur off his legs to make nests for their young. And the more they nibbled, the colder his legs got, until suddenly he woke up with an ow! And there he was, sitting in his chair, with his feet in the water, and water all round him. He splashed to the door and looked out. "This is serious," said Pooh. "I must have an escape." So he took his largest pot of honey and escaped with it to a broad branch of his tree, well above the water. And then he climbed down again and escaped with another pot. And when the whole escape was finished, there was Pooh, sitting on his branch, dangling his legs, and there beside him were 10 pots of honey. 2 days later, there was Pooh, sitting on his branch, dangling his legs, and there beside him was 1 pot of honey. 4 days later, there was Pooh, and it was on the morning of the 4th day that Piglet's bottle came floating past him, and with one loud cry of "Honey!" Pooh plunged into the water, seized the bottle, and struggled back to his tree again. "Bother," said Pooh as he opened it. "All that wet for nothing. What's that bit of paper doing?" He took it out and looked at it. "It's a message," he said to himself. "That's what it is. And that letter is a P. And so is that. And so is that. And P means Pooh. So it's a very important message to me. And I can't read it. I must find Christopher Robin or Owl or Piglet or one of those clever readers who can read things, and they'll tell me what this message means. Only I can't swim. Bother." Then he had an idea. And I think that for a bear of very little brain it was a good idea. He said to himself, "If a bottle can float, then a jar can float. And if a jar floats, I can sit on the top of it, if it's a very big jar." So he took his biggest jar and corked it up. "All boats have to have a name," he said, "so I shall call mine the Floating Bear." And with these words he dropped his boat into the water and jumped in after it. For a little while, Pooh and the floating bear were uncertain as to which of them was meant to be on the top, but after trying one or two different positions, they settled down with the floating bear underneath and Pooh triumphantly astride it, paddling vigorously with his feet. "Oh, Pooh!" cried Christopher Robin. "Where are you?" "Here I am," said a growly voice behind him. "Pooh!" They rushed into each other's arms. "How did you get here, Pooh?" asked Christopher Robin, when he was ready to talk again. "On my boat," said Pooh proudly. "I had a very important message sent me in a bottle, and owing to having got some water in my eyes, I couldn't read it, so I brought it to you. On my boat." With these proud words, he gave Christopher Robin the message. "But it's from Piglet," cried Christopher Robin when he'd read it. "Isn't there anything about Pooh in it?" asked Bear, looking over his shoulder. Christopher Robin read the message aloud. "Oh, are those peas Piglets? I thought they were Pooh's." "We must rescue him at once. I thought he was with you, Pooh. Owl, could you rescue him on your back?" "I don't think so," said Owl, after grave thought. "It is doubtful if the necessary dorsal muscles—" "Then would you fly to him at once and say that rescue is coming? And Pooh and I will think of a rescue and come as quick as ever we can. Oh, don't talk, Owl. Go on, quick." And still thinking of something to say, Owl flew off. "Now then, Pooh," said Christopher Robin, "where's your boat?" "I ought to say," explained Pooh as they walked down to the shore of the island, "that it isn't just an ordinary sort of boat. Sometimes it's a boat and sometimes it's more of an accident. It all depends." "Depends on what?" "On whether I'm on the top of it or underneath it." "Oh, well, where is it?" "There," said Pooh, pointing proudly to the floating bear. It wasn't what Christopher Robin expected, and the more he looked at it, the more he thought what a brave and clever bear Pooh was. And the more Christopher Robin thought this, the more Pooh looked modestly down his nose and tried to pretend he wasn't. "But it's too small for two of us," said Christopher Robin sadly. "Three of us with Piglet. Well, that makes it smaller still. Oh, Pooh Bear, what shall we do?" And then this bear, Pooh Bear, Winnie the Pooh, F.O.P., friend of Piglet's, R.C., Rabbit's companion, in fact, Pooh himself, said something so clever that Christopher Robin could only look at him with mouth open and eyes staring, wondering if this was really the bear of very little brain whom he'd known and loved so long. "We might go in your umbrella," said Pooh. Suddenly, Christopher Robin saw that they might. He opened his umbrella and put it point downwards in the water. It floated but wobbled. Pooh got in. He was just beginning to say that it was all right now when he found that it wasn't. So after a short drink, which he didn't really want, he waded back to Christopher Robin. Then they both got in together, and it wobbled no longer. "I shall call this boat the Brain of Pooh," said Christopher Robin. And the Brain of Pooh set sail forthwith in a southwesterly direction, revolving gracefully. You can imagine Piglet's joy when at last he saw the good ship Brain of Pooh, Captain C. Robin, First Mate P. Bear, coming over the sea to rescue him. Robin gives a Pooh party, and we say goodbye. Owl, said Christopher Robin, I'm going to give a party.
You are you?
Said Owl. And it's to be a special sort of party, because it's because of what Pooh did when he did what he did to save Piglet from the flood.
Oh, that's what it's for, is it?
Said Owl. Yes. So will you tell Pooh as quickly as you can, and all the others, because it will be tomorrow.
Oh, it will it?
Said Owl, still being as helpful as possible. So will you go and tell them, Owl? Owl tried to think of something very wise to say, but couldn't, so he flew off to tell the others. And the first person he told was Pooh.
Pooh, he said. Christopher Robin is giving a party.
Oh, said Pooh. And then, seeing that Owl expected him to say something else, he said, Will there be those little cake things with pink sugar icing? Owl felt that it was rather beneath him to talk about little cake things with pink sugar icing, so he told Pooh exactly what Christopher Robin had said, and flew off to Eeyore. A party for me, thought Pooh to himself. How grand! And he began to wonder if all the other animals would know that it was a special Pooh party, and if Christopher Robin had told them about the floating bear, and the brain of Pooh, and all the wonderful ships he'd invented and sailed on, and he began to think how awful it would be if everybody had forgotten about it, and nobody quite knew what the party was for. And the more he thought like this, the more the party got muddled in his mind, like a dream when nothing goes right. And the dream began to sing itself over in his head, until it became a sort of song. It was an anxious Pooh song. 3 cheers for Pooh. For who? For Pooh. Why, what did he do? I thought you knew. He saved his friend from a wetting. 3 cheers for Bear. For where? For Bear. He couldn't swim, but he rescued him. He rescued who? Oh, listen, do. I am talking of Pooh. And I don't know if he could swim or not, but he managed to float on a sort of boat. On a sort of what? Well, a sort of pot. So now let's give him 3 hearty cheers. So now let's give him 3 hearty witches, and hope he'll be with us for years and years, and grow in health and wisdom and riches. 3 cheers for Pooh. For who? For Pooh. 3 cheers for Bear. For where? For Bear. 3 cheers for the wonderful Winnie the Pooh. Just tell me, somebody, what did he do? While this was going on inside him, Owl was talking to Eeyore.
Eeyore,
said Owl,
Christopher Robin is giving a party. Very interesting, said Eeyore. I suppose they'll be sending me down the odd bits which get trodden on. Kind and thoughtful, not at all. Don't mention it. There's an invitation for you.
Ah, said Eeyore.
A mistake, no doubt. But still I shall come. Only don't blame me if it rains.
But it didn't rain. Christopher Robin had made a long table out of some long pieces of wood, and they all sat round it. Christopher Robin sat at one end, and Pooh sat at the other. And between them on one side were Owl and Eeyore and Piglet, and between them on the other side were Rabbit and Roo and Kanga. And all Rabbit's friends and relations spread themselves about on the grass and waited hopefully in case anybody spoke to them or dropped anything or asked them the time. When they had all nearly eaten enough, Christopher Robin banged on the table with his spoon, and everybody stopped talking and was very silent, except Roo, who was just finishing a loud attack of hiccups and trying to look as if it was one of Rabbit's relations. "This party," said Christopher Robin, "is a party because of what someone did, and we all know who it was, and it's his party because of what he did. And I've got a present for him, And here it is." Then he felt about a little and whispered, "Where is it?" While he was looking, Eeyore coughed in an impressive way and began to speak. "Friends," he said, "including oddments, it is a great pleasure, or perhaps I had better say it has been a pleasure so far to see you at my party. What I did was nothing. Any of you, except Rabbit and Owl and Kanga, would have done the same. Oh, and Pooh. My remarks do not, of course, apply to Piglet and Roo, because they are too small. Any of you would have done the same, but it just happened to be me. It was not, I need hardly say, with an idea of getting what Christopher Robin is looking for now." And he put his front leg to his mouth and said in a loud whisper, "Try under the table, that I did what I did, but because I feel that we should all do what we can to help. I feel that we should all—" "Here it is!" cried Christopher Robin excitedly. "Pass it down to silly old Pooh. It's for Pooh."
"For Pooh?"
said Eeyore. "Well, of course it is. The best bear in all the world." When Pooh saw what it was, he nearly fell down, he was so pleased. It was a special pencil case. There were pencils in it marked B for bear, and pencils marked HB for helping bear, and pencils marked BB for brave bear. There was a knife for sharpening the pencils, an India rubber for rubbing out anything which you'd spelt wrong, and a ruler for ruling lines for the words to walk on, and inches marked on the ruler, in case you wanted to know how many inches anything was, and blue pencils and red pencils and green pencils for saying special things in blue and red and green. "Oh," said Pooh. "Oh, Pooh," said everybody else except Eeyore. "Thank you," growled Pooh. But Eeyore was saying to himself,
"This writing business, pencils and what-not, overrated if you ask me. Silly stuff, nothing in it." Later on, when they'd all said goodbye and thank you to Christopher Robin, Pooh and Piglet walked home together in the golden evening, and for a long time they were silent.
"When you wake up in the morning, Pooh," said Piglet at last, "what's the first thing you say to yourself?"
"What's for breakfast?" said Pooh. "What do you say, Piglet?"
"I say, I wonder what's going to happen exciting today,"
said Piglet. Pooh nodded thoughtfully. "It's the same thing," he said.